I just wanted to see how he was doing. He was actually very friendly. Sometimes things have been difficult between us, but this time he was exceptionally friendly. I think he really wants this to be over. That is the impression I got from the meeting. He wants the war to end. I think this is the perfect moment to do that. I'm going to talk to Vladimir Putin and see if we can stop this conflict. These people are incredibly brave. They're fighting all over the world. You know, last week, as I said, about 7,000 Russian and Ukrainian soldiers died. Almost 7,000 in 1 week. That's madness, real madness. That's why I'm going to talk to Putin. I also had a good meeting with Zelenskyy, as well as many other meaningful meetings. We had many constructive talks with various leaders. He is fighting a courageous and extremely difficult fight. Donald Trump's tone towards Ukraine has become noticeably softer, but the problem is that tomorrow he may forget about it or change his position after a new conversation, including with Vladimir Putin. The question arises, should we expect concrete actions and real help from Trump, or will it again turn out to be just loud words? That's what we're going to talk about right now in this broadcast and more. My name is Anastasiia Norytsyna, and on the line with us is Boris Pincus, social activist and president of the Ronald Reagan Republican Club. Boris Yakovlevich, hello, it's a pleasure to welcome you. Good afternoon, dears, glad to be on the air with you, and glory to Ukraine. Glory to the heroes. Friends, we are live, so don't forget to leave your comments and questions. What do you think about the meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump? Put a like and indicate from which city and country you are watching us. By the way, right now there is a poll on YouTube under this broadcast. How, in your opinion, did the meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump go? The options are as follows. The first, everything went very well. The second, badly and will not change anything. And the third, leave your opinion in the comments. We will definitely summarize the results at the end of the broadcast. Boris Yakovlevich, how successful do you think this meeting was? After all, both Zelenskyy claims that the meeting was good, and Donald Trump called him very nice, emphasizing that everything went fine. I would agree with Zelenskyy. Not everything went perfectly, but still good. Why? Because the NATO leadership was seriously concerned that no disagreement between Zelenskyy and Trump would arise at the summit again, which could spoil their relationship. This concern was not hidden even by Jens Stoltenberg, speaking openly about it. Moreover, NATO, primarily the Secretary General himself, actually accepted almost all of Trump's conditions to avoid irritating him. There was even softened language in the final communiqué, where Russia is mentioned only once. Can you imagine? At the previous alliance's 75th anniversary summit in Washington, Russia was mentioned 40 times, and each time with condemnation. And now, just one. NATO leaders did their best not to provoke Trump, and judging by his positive comments about Zelenskyy, they succeeded.
Членов НАТО, в котором только Россия упоминается всего один раз. Вы можете представить? Все время как на предыдущем саммите, на юбилейном, который прошел в прошлом году в Вашингтоне, 75-летие, которое отмечали, 40 раз упоминалась Россия с осуждением, а в этот раз всего один раз. То есть, знаете, руководство НАТО пошло на все, чтобы как-то не раздражать Трампа. И им это удалось. Слава Богу, отзывы Трампа о встрече с Зеленским хорошие.
Moreover, I believe that Trump publicly promised Zelenskyy to try to help Ukraine with the delivery of a Patriot air defense system, exactly what Zelenskyy regularly asks for. In addition, on the eve of his visit, Trump gave German Chancellor Merz approval to give Ukraine another such system. This indicates positive progress. Another piece of good news is that Trump has agreed to include a separate amount in the NATO budget for this year, specifically to help Ukraine, and that's very significant. As you can see, there are quite a few positives. And another one is that Trump has promised to talk to Putin. He admitted that he has a complicated relationship with him. It's difficult to communicate, but he still intends to discuss the situation with him next week. He also noted that Zelenskyy wants peace, and repeated this twice. Given the intense pressure from a bipartisan Congress that is actively pushing for action, Trump will be preparing for a phone conversation with Putin upon his return to Washington, where he will likely outline specific timelines or set some sort of deadline.
Вот видите, столько позитивов хороших. И еще один позитив. Да, Трамп пообещал поговорить с Путиным. Он открыто сказал, что у него проблемы с Путиным. Трудно говорить с Путиным. Окей? Вот. И он будет говорить на следующей неделе с Путиным. И он сказал, что Зеленский хочет мира. Он это повторил дважды. Таким образом, учитывая, что он находится под колоссальным давлением двухпартийного Конгресса, Конгресс торопится очень, окей? И сейчас по возвращении в Вашингтон Трамп, планируя свою беседу с Путиным по телефону, конечно же, должен дать какие-то ограничения во времени, какой-то дедлайн.
You know, like, I'll give you a week, okay? If you don't stop shelling Ukraine, I will use my Trump cards. And he has them, and it's obvious. You and I have talked about these tools many times, the very sanctions that are on his desk. Trump attributes his inaction to one reason alone. I want to have space to have a dialogue with Putin about ending the war, but that space is shrinking, and it is no longer tolerable. Every day the whole world, including Trump himself, sees what this dictator is doing on the long-suffering Ukrainian land. Kiev, Dnipro, Odessa, Kharkov, and other cities continue to suffer. Trump sees this, and yet his indifferent tone is disturbing and worrisome. However, I refer again to a bipartisan Congress that can no longer remain on hold for too long. In my opinion, Trump's upcoming phone conversation with Putin will be a defining decision, and it will happen as early as next week. All that remains is to be patient.
Это все Трамп видит, и, к сожалению, знаете, равнодушный тон, с которым говорит об этом Трамп, нас это тревожит, волнует. Но опять-таки я ссылаюсь на наш двухпартийный Конгресс, который не может долго терпеть. На мой взгляд, вот этот предстоящий телефонный разговор с Путиным, он будет решающим в принятии Трампом решений. А это произойдет уже на будущей неделе. Давайте наберемся терпения.
Of course, Boris Yakovlevich, we expect that we will also receive the Patriot systems that Donald Trump talked about. By the way, a BBC journalist from Ukraine, whose husband is also in the army, asked about them, and Trump, yes, commented on that. We hope we do get those systems because he said we would like to hand them over, but they are very effective and we are sending them to Israel as well. So there are a lot of questions right now, whether he will still send us these weapons or not. However, Zelenskyy said that joint production of unmanned systems was also discussed at the meeting. As far as I understand, Trump is interested in such cooperation, because Ukraine, in my opinion, is one of the most effective countries in this field today, and it is such a partnership that can bring real results. Absolutely, I've personally heard about it myself. A few weeks ago, I was in Washington, D.C., at a party event where all sorts of people were gathered, including representatives of the defense industry. One of the participants, when we were talking about Ukraine, bluntly stated, "You know, the Ukrainians are amazing in their achievements in drone and drone production. Moreover, there are already talks about helping Ukraine organize the production of these systems on its territory. There they cost less and are created with high precision and engineering ingenuity. The American side is considering the possibility of purchasing these drones from Ukraine and even further assistance to countries in need of such technologies. In America, this is perceived as a new strategic direction, along with the use of Ukrainian resources in the mining and processing of rare earth metals. This is no longer just a technology, but a full-fledged weapon developed by Ukrainian specialists. This is really impressive. And, remarkably, Just a couple of days ago, the Ukrainian armed forces sank another Russian military boat in the Black Sea, already the 28th according to experts.
ВСУ потопило еще один военный катер российский на Черном море. Он уже 28-й по счету, как говорят эксперты.
Moreover, this boat was carrying paratroopers, and the Ukrainian army attacked it with marine drones developed by its own specialists. It is noteworthy that Ukraine is the only country in the world that has a full-fledged army of marine drones. This does not escape the attention of the Americans, and I have always said and repeat, today the best army in Europe is the Ukrainian army. Europe is already focused on the Ukrainian army as a model for the future, but to do so, it is necessary to help Ukraine win this war and gradually restore the 1991 borders, first along the current front line and then with the return of the occupied territories. This is what the European efforts are aimed at, and I'm sure it's in the minds of many American congressmen as well. They keep reminding Trump of this, and he will eventually have to get serious about the Ukrainian issue, especially since after, as he believes, his victory in Iran, he came back in high spirits, full of optimism, and this somewhat loosens his hands when it comes to helping Ukraine. The last 12 days of the war in Iran did divert the international community's attention, but now there is an opportunity to focus on Ukraine again.
Успеха, как считает Трамп, его победы в Иране. Он воодушевленный приехал, он был очень позитивен во многом, и это развязывает немножко руки Трампу в оказывании помощи Украине уже и большим уделением внимания Украине. Вот эти 12 дней войны в Иране, например, да, они отвлекли внимание мировой общественности от Украины.
All attention was redirected to the Middle East, but now, thank God, the war there is over. Let us return to Europe, namely Ukraine. The King of Belgium gave a very inspiring speech. He devoted almost his entire speech to Ukraine, and even toasted to its victory, which is quite remarkable. Trump has seen and heard all of this, and I think this summit could be a turning point on the road to increasing support for Ukraine until it is completely defeated. Let's wait for Trump's phone call with Putin next week. It will determine a lot, especially considering that Trump himself is not doing well domestically and has less and less time left. Now he is trying to prove not only to the international community, but above all to us, the voters, that he is capable of being the successful president he was in his first cadence. More than 5 months have already passed, and there are still no significant international successes. And here, in my opinion, the first step towards such success is the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. Thank God Trump has decided to do that. At worst, he has at least delayed Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons for a few months, and that is certainly 100% accomplishment.
Первый успех, я считаю, все-таки это успех на эти вот атаки ядерных центров Ирана. Слава богу, Трамп решился на это. Слава богу, он, знаете, вот в самом худшем случае он отодвинул возможности Ирана производства ядерного оружия на
There can be no doubt about that, but the rest now depends on Israel itself, although Israel's actions in Iran did not end as hoped, because the Iranian top brass remained virtually unharmed, including Ayatollah himself. Moreover, people are celebrating in the streets of Iran today, accompanying the celebrations with curses against America and Israel. On top of that, Iran has publicly stated that it intends to continue developing nuclear weapons, and no one, they assure us, is capable of preventing this. Such statements are coming from Ayatollah's entourage. So, unfortunately, Trump should realize that an underdog enemy will never become a friend. This applies to both Putin and Ayatollah. Until this is realized, there will be no peace anywhere. But thank God, we still have hope in Israel, a country that has been fighting for its existence since 1948. And in this recent war, the Israeli army has shown remarkable effectiveness. All elements of Iran's air defense system were destroyed, including the Russian S-300 and S-400, and almost the entire Iranian military top brass, more than 30 people, were eliminated.
Всю систему противовоздушной обороны Ирана, которые состояли из российских С-300, С-400, и уничтожив практически всю военную верхушку, иранскую, где-то около 30 человек.
Let's see where his talk goes next week. Although that alone is not enough, we need to continue to be proactive. The situation is indeed serious. The Israeli leadership, led by Benjamin Netanyahu, has loudly declared that it will keep its hand on Iran's pulse, closely watching the direction of the situation, and having the advantage in Iranian airspace, is ready to use force. This is exactly what we have hoped for. For Ukraine, this is especially important, because disabling Iran's military industry weakens Russia's support, including the supply of Iranian Shaheds and ballistic missiles. This is a significant contribution to Ukraine's fight for its independence against Russian aggression. It is important to watch the developments because it will soon be possible to judge the limits of patience of Trump himself, who keeps repeating that it is time to end the war and that Russia must stop. Now it's up to him. Let's see how long he has to keep repeating it.
Поэтому теперь час слова за Трампом. Давайте посмотрим, к чему приведет его разговор на следующей неделе. Посмотрим. Это очень важно, и там уже будут видны горизонты терпений того же Трампа, который все время говорит, что надо кончать, Россия должна закончить. Ну, посмотрим, как долго Трампу придется это повторять.
Friends, leave your comments and don't forget to give this video a like. Also vote in our poll. We have 292 votes so far. 36% think the meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump went very well, 7% think it went badly, and 58% think it won't change anything. Overall, I think this is the opinion that is really shared by the majority. Donald Trump constantly states, "If I were president, this wouldn't happen." But in practice, the situation with the war in Ukraine remains the same. Nevertheless, today, President Zelenskyy congratulated Trump on his successful operation in the Middle East, stressing that the U.S. actions have weakened not only Iran's nuclear program, but also drone production. And here I am, Boris Yakovlevich, thinking, perhaps this is what played a role in the softer rhetoric we heard later from Trump on Ukraine. Zelenskyy expressed support and gratitude, while Putin, on the other hand, condemned the operation, saying the U.S. should not have bombed Iranian nuclear facilities.
Зеленский его поздравил, поблагодарил, а Путин, получается, его осудил и говорил, что США не должны были бомбить ядерные объекты Ирана.
You know, the merit of Zelenskyy is that he made very correct conclusions after the failed meeting on February 28th in the Oval Office. He intelligently rearranged himself and began to focus on Trump's personal qualities in subsequent dialogues. And Trump is known to love being praised. The most obvious example, look at the enthusiastic words his supporters, including odious figures, are posting on social networks, praising him and NATO. And Zelenskyy behaved wisely. In response to the same Vance who criticized him for alleged ingratitude, he emphasized his gratitude to Trump and America for their support. It's working. Trump is receptive to recognition. Yes, even if for pragmatic reasons, you have to say what he wants to hear if it results in helping Ukraine. That is indeed important. But behind the outward form lies something much more substantial. Trump is under increasing pressure. By attending the summit, he heard a near-unanimous position from all 32 NATO members, insisting that Ukraine needs help. And to this is added the opinion of his voters. More than 50% of Americans, regardless of party affiliation, are in favor of supporting Ukraine, not to mention the rare bipartisan consensus in the United States on this issue.
Услышал мнение практически всех членов, 32 членов НАТО, о том, что Украине нужна помощь. И плюс к этому, конечно же, это его электорат. И подавляющее большинство американцев, более 50%, независимо от партийной принадлежности за помощь Украине. И я не говорю о том, что двухпартийное единство. Двухпартийное единство в оказании помощи.
All of this gives me reason to be optimistic. Those who today vote that nothing will change and that we should not wait for help are deeply mistaken. This opinion is formed under the influence of Goebbels' Putin propaganda, which suggests that America will never provide support. But it isn't. The words Trump spoke today matter and cannot be ignored. Nevertheless, let's judge Trump not by statements but by actions, and they will surely follow. He publicly promised help with Patriot systems, and now he will not be able to go back on his word. You and I will soon see the results. The main thing is that Trump doesn't have time to keep postponing decisions and relying on Putin, who, as I always say, is like Vaska the cat. He listens and eats. Putin shows willingness to negotiate, but in reality continues to destroy the Ukrainian population. All of this is getting through to Trump. He sees and hears what is happening. Therefore, his upcoming phone conversation will be key. Let's wait and see how it turns out and what steps will follow.
И Путин точно так же делает вид, что он хочет мира и готов вступить в переговоры, а тем временем продолжает уничтожать украинское население. Это все до Трампа доносится, он это слышит, видит. И я думаю, что опять-таки, возвращаясь к будущему разговору телефонному, давайте подождем, посмотрим, каков будет сам разговор и какие выводы после этого разговора сделает Трамп.
By the way, it is very remarkable that Ukrainian President Zelenskyy discussed with Trump the situation on the battlefield, showed him the real picture of what is happening, and convincingly conveyed that Russia is not winning, and all statements about the so-called victory are exaggerations spread by the Kremlin. The negotiations in Istanbul and the prisoner exchange process were also touched upon. Moreover, during the meeting, Zelenskyy showed Trump photos showing that the Russian side is returning to Ukraine the bodies of not only Ukrainian, but also its own soldiers, which shows the Kremlin's complete indifference even to its own people. We hope this will make an impression and influence perceptions. In addition to this, I was interested in Donald Trump's recent statement about NATO. He noted that he was leaving the NATO summit a different person because he realized how deeply the leaders of the alliance's member states love their nations and are committed to defending them. Quote, I watched as the heads of these countries stood up, and the love and passion they showed for their countries was unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. They want to defend their countries. They need the United States, and it won't be the same without them. It was truly moving and inspiring. I leave here a different person, with the idea that these leaders really love their countries. This is not a show-off, and it's especially surprising given that just a few days ago, Donald Trump was saying very different things. He criticized NATO, expressed dissatisfaction with Europe, and even threatened that the US might pull out of the alliance and stop providing aid. Now the question arises, how will all this affect unity within NATO, and has Trump finally realized that Europe is ready and willing to defend itself? On the one hand, we should not forget that Trump has his own strategy. First, to escalate relations with partners, opponents, or even enemies, and then to de-escalate them at the negotiating table. He has done something similar with European allies. And, it must be admitted, he succeeded in this. Let's be objective. Why should Europeans living well, often better than Americans themselves, receive constant support? For example, any federal employee in most European countries has 30 days of paid vacation, while American civil servants have only 12. Add to this the higher average life expectancy in Europe, and already from these two factors we can conclude that in general, Europeans do live better. That's why Trump reasonably asks, why should we provide your security and care for your well-being when you can do just as well on your own? It's time, he says, for Europe to start taking more care of itself. World War II is long over. The Marshall Plan helped you get back on your feet, and the US has already done a great deal to almost completely secure you.
Достаточно вот этих двух показателей, чтобы сделать выводы, что европейцы все-таки лучше живут, чем американцы. Поэтому президент Трамп говорит, подождите, ну почему мы должны заботиться о вашем благополучии, о вашей безопасности, когда вы прекрасно живете? Так давайте подтяните немножко пояса свои, позаботьтесь о себе. Ведь Вторая мировая война давно закончилась. Ведь план Маршалла вам помог встать на ноги, окей? Мы очень многое сделали для вас, обеспечив практически всю вашу безопасность.
That is, you spent practically nothing on your defense until recently, always less than 2% of your gross domestic product. And now, given that you are living well and there is an aggressor in Europe itself, an enemy that may be at your doorstep tomorrow, it is time to finally take responsibility and help yourselves. I'll be there for you. I'll be there for you. That's Trump's philosophy. That's his strategy. And thank God he achieved a certain success at this summit. It was decided that by 2035 European countries will commit to invest 5% in their military budgets, 3.5% of which will go to the development of the military-industrial complex and 1.5% to military infrastructure, including logistics and other related areas. The vast majority of countries have already agreed to this decision and have begun to meet these targets. Canada and Spain are still standing out. In all likelihood, the issue with Canada will be resolved. Negotiations are underway. It is our neighbor, and I am sure it will be so. Spain is more complicated. Sanchez, a socialist in power, seems to dream of communism in his country. However, Trump plans to meet with him in person, one-on-one. Even though he may not be completely convinced, he may still be able to make some progress. Overall, Trump has been successful, and things are generally fair.
Который вообще спит и видит коммунизм в своей стране, этот Санчес, но Трамп обещает с ним встретиться и говорить тет-на-тет. Вот это очень важно. Я не думаю, что Трампу удастся его переубедить, и тем не менее что-то может сработать, хоть немного. Вот. В целом Трамп добился успеха. В целом так должно быть, это справедливо.
Okay, that's really important. On the other hand, I think you all liked the fact that Trump publicly stated his commitment to NATO and emphasized that the member countries of the alliance are America's friends, and friends don't leave friends in the lurch. Trump will never give up on any European country if it finds itself militarily threatened. It's not going to happen. He simply seeks to pull allies up to a level where they are self-sufficient and able to defend themselves. That's Trump's philosophy, and it's important. It would be great if European countries, along with investing in their defense sectors, also invested more in the American economy. This creates a basis for reciprocity, because when countries invest in the US, America tends to reciprocate with even greater returns. It is no coincidence that trillions of dollars from around the world are flowing into the US economy, because those who invest understand that the return will be powerful, effective, and mutually beneficial. And that is why it is worth noting once again the importance of the signed agreement between Ukraine and America on cooperation in the field of rare earth metals. It is a significant first step.
Поэтому я опять возвращаюсь к тому потрясающему соглашению, которое было подписано между Украиной и Америкой по редкоземельным металлам.
The second step should be to develop the production of weapons, including drones. This would be extremely useful. It is already necessary today to fix such initiatives legally and conclude agreements between American enterprises and Ukrainian drone manufacturers. This should be realized promptly and consistently. There are many technological developments that are still unknown to the general public. Ukrainian engineers are amazingly talented and capable of creating innovative solutions. Moreover, they could effectively cooperate with Israeli specialists. Israel, by the way, has recently demonstrated unique innovations in air defense, technologies that have been used with high success against Iranian drones and include radio-electronic means that have never been used before. This has already aroused interest in the U.S., and Israeli companies have begun to receive offers of cooperation with U.S. manufacturers. It is in this context that Ukraine should be more active in establishing a partnership with Israel in this technological area.
показали миру свои новинки, которых нет ни у кого в мире. Речь идет об тех новинках, которые они применяют сегодня в своей системе противовоздушной обороны при сбитии беспилотников иранских. Они применили радиоэлектронную технику, которая до сих пор нигде не применялась, с довольно большим успехом. На это уже обратили в Америке, и уже, знаете, уже сыпется предложение к израильским корпорациям, компаниям, чтобы они кооперировали с американцами. И вот тут бы надо было бы Украине поближе кооперироваться с Израилем в этом направлении.
Interestingly, there are opinions that the Mossad's actions on Iranian territory, the targeted killing of more than 30 Iranian military leaders, including with the use of drones, are reminiscent of the operations that Ukraine carried out inside Russia with the help of its spiderweb program. Some experts wonder if all this is coming from a single source, and if Ukrainian and Israeli intelligence services are not acting in concert. I would very much like it to be true, because such security cooperation would benefit both nations and help in the fight against common evil. Let me remind you that Putin's evil remains as aggressive as ever, and Iran's evil has not been eradicated. The leader of the Iranian clergy is still alive, active, and continues to threaten Iran, Israel, and the United States. It is quite possible that Iran will soon return to rebuilding its nuclear infrastructure. That is why close coordination between Israeli and Ukrainian specialists, both in defense and intelligence services, could benefit not only the two countries, but the entire world.
Глава иранского духовенства жив-здоров, он продолжает агрессивную риторику вести, угрозы и в адрес Ирана, Израиля, и в адрес Америки. Так что недалек тот час, когда Иран вполне может опять вернуться на круги своя по восстановлению своей ядерной инфраструктуры. Вполне возможно. Но тут опять-таки, знаете, координация и сотрудничество между израильскими экспертами и украинскими и в смысле обороны, и в смысле секретных служб, оно было бы только на пользу всему миру, не только этим двум только странам.
I hope everything goes to that. It will. At the same time, Trump admitted that Putin has territorial ambitions outside of Ukraine. To a related question, he replied, "Yes, it's possible." At the same time, he said that Putin would like to get out of the war in Ukraine because it is a big problem for him. Trump added, "I think Putin is confused." How do you assess such statements? And how do you perceive Trump's views in general, especially his words about his commitment to NATO's Article 5? Can NATO countries still count on the United States if even Trump himself says that Putin might be planning to attack other countries as well?
Будут ли страны НАТО рассчитывать на Соединенные Штаты и дальше, если даже Трамп заявляет, что Путин, может быть, хочет напасть и на других?
Well, you know, Trump, let's remember, has a speech problem. Sometimes you can't tell if he's being ironic, if he's being serious, or if he believes what he's saying at all. So, in my opinion, you shouldn't pay attention to his rhetoric, especially if he is seriously pinned against the wall and asked, "Putin says that Ukraine is his, and everything else is also his. How do you see it?" He will answer as he should, but what you just referred to is basically verbal shorthand. I don't think he's taking it seriously himself, and the fact that he's supposedly giving Putin the benefit of the doubt, no, that's completely out of the question. I think such statements should not be paid attention to. As for the fifth article of the NATO Charter, Trump has already made it clear. He is a NATO member, his allies are NATO members, and he will abide by the Charter. He will never stand aside if any member of the alliance comes under aggression, even by Putin.
Члены НАТО его, союзники его, и он будет просто выполнять устав НАТО. Он никогда не останется в стороне, если кто-то из членов НАТО окажется, знаете, под агрессией, станет жертвой агрессии даже того же Путина.
Excluded completely. So it is not surprising that the Finns, who have the longest border with Russia, are so concerned. It has already been reported today that Eastern European countries bordering Russia are beginning to move to mine their border areas. Can you imagine the extent to which things are escalating? I am not talking about the fact that military exercises are now being actively conducted. In the near future, for example, Finland will host large-scale maneuvers with the participation of several NATO countries led by Germany. This is extremely important. And of course, none of this is happening without Trump's knowledge. Absolutely not. He, as one of the main ones in NATO, nothing is conducted without his consent, especially when it comes to the use of American-made weapons. So to say that Trump would allegedly withdraw from NATO or not honor Article 5 of the Charter is completely out of the question. After all, don't forget, we live in a democratic country, we have a bipartisan Congress, and it fully supports assistance to Ukraine. So in that sense, there is nothing to worry about.
НАТО, он не будет соблюдать 5-й параграф, исключено полностью. В конце концов, давайте не будем забывать, мы в демократической стране, и у нас есть Конгресс, двухпартийный Конгресс, который целиком и полностью за оказание помощи Украине. Так что нет оснований беспокоиться в этом отношении.
Boris Yakovlevich, why is Congress still not bringing to a vote a package of sanctions against Russia and the imposition of 500% duties against those countries that continue to buy oil and gas from the Russian Federation? Is everyone waiting for Trump's approval again? Or why can't congressmen make this decision bypassing the president? Admittedly, everything was ready for it, but at the last minute Trump asked to wait. I think we have already discussed this. He wants to have a conversation with Putin first, especially since this package of sanctions will be his main trump card, and I think Trump will definitely remind Putin about it in a personal conversation. I think we won't have to wait long. After their conversation, we will already understand exactly how quickly these sanctions will be imposed, especially considering that after the 27th package of sanctions imposed by Europe against Russia, there was encouraging news from experts. It seriously hit Russia's sovereign wealth fund. Let me remind you that before these sanctions were imposed in April, and it was just the 17th package, the fund's volume amounted to $42 billion. After they were imposed, it was reduced by $6 billion, and now it is only $36 billion. Imagine this. If America imposes its own tough sanctions, there could be nothing left of this fund by the end of the year. This is extremely important. And if we add to this that Trump fulfills his promises to deliver, for example, Patriot systems, and on the other hand, the flow of weapons to Ukraine continues, then, in general, everything adds up to a rather encouraging scenario.
Еще Америка ведет свои драконовские санкции, то представьте себе, что от этого фонда благосостояния останется пшик до конца этого года. Вот это очень важно. Ну, если к этому добавить, что Трамп выполнит свои обещания по поставкам, например, систем Patriot с одной стороны, и еще с другой стороны будут поступать вооружения, Украину.
Let me remind you that there are three main sources of funding for Ukraine. The first source is funds from European countries. A positive outcome of the last summit was that the NATO budget included funds for assistance to Ukraine, with Trump's approval. This is very important. The second source is the independent initiative of NATO countries, in particular European members, who have already raised $50 billion for Ukraine. And there is another very significant source which we need to constantly remind and actively promote. It is frozen Russian assets. We are talking about $300 billion in banks in Belgium and France. If these funds are unfrozen, they will become a powerful financial resource to support Ukraine. This money can be used to buy weapons from the US. That's how it should work. I think all this will start to work very soon.
$300 миллиардов, которые находятся в банках Бельгии и Франции. Так вот, если эти 300 миллиардов будут разморожены, я думаю, что это хорошие деньги для оказания помощи Украине. На эти деньги можно покупать оружие у Америки. Вот так должно быть.
Friends, don't forget to leave your comments and like this video. It is important for promotion on YouTube. We also invite you to take part in our poll. How do you assess the meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump? As successful, unsuccessful, or one that changed nothing? Boris Yakovlevich, do you think Putin can now try again to offer something to Donald Trump? It's hard to say what exactly, but it seems that the Kremlin dictator is constantly trying to delay the negotiation process and delay the imposition of sanctions. You and I have already discussed that Putin is trying to seduce Trump with rare earth metals, Russian oil, gas, and opportunities in the Arctic, all of which he has been offering Trump. At some point, Trump seemed to be interested in it, but he stopped mentioning it recently.
Видите ли, помните, мы с вами говорили, что Путин соблазняет Трампа вот этими редкоземельными металлами России, нефтью, газом России, даже Арктикой. Представляете, вы все это он предлагает Трампу. Ну, Трамп одно время воодушевился этим, но в последнее время он перестал говорить об этом.
There is another area Putin is pushing. He is pressing Trump to resume direct air service between Moscow and New York as soon as possible, so that, for example, Aeroflot can start flying again. This is very important to him. Why? Because Putin's own relatives, his inner circle, and many Duma deputies have assets in the United States. They all want to vacation in America, enjoy the American way of life, while continuing to curse, and threaten the same country. This is the paradox. On the one hand, hatred; on the other, desire for the comforts and privileges of the West. I think that Trump may try to use this as an element of bargaining. Say, if you stop aggression against Ukraine and stop military actions, we can gradually begin to restore some relations. Such a development is quite possible. But to be honest, for me personally, it looks immoral and criminal.
И, остановишь свою войну агрессивную и так далее. А мы вот таким образом можем вот так вот потихоньку восстанавливать свои отношения. Такое возможно. Но для меня это лично, как лично для меня, это аморально, это преступно, я так считаю.
You cannot talk to criminals of Putin's caliber in a conciliatory tone. Only force works here. And the fact that Trump used force against Iran's nuclear infrastructure for the first time is a positive signal. It is a powerful message not only to Putin, but also to Xi Jinping and Kim. However, it is important not to tone it down. A conciliatory mood can undo all that has been achieved, for example, in Iran. Trump needs to keep that in mind. I think, feeling victorious in the situation with Iran, he will now talk to Putin on a completely different level. That's the way it should be. Common sense tells us that only a firm stance gets results, not concessions, apologies, or compliments to the aggressor. Hopefully, Trump will act reasonably. I really want to believe that. We'll see. Lastly, I'd like to hear some positive news.
Так должно быть. Так должно быть. Логика, разумная логика подсказывает, именно так должно быть. А не так вот уступнически, извиняющийся, вы знаете, вот поощряющий, вы знаете, и комплиментарно. Так не должно быть. И я надеюсь, Трамп будет поступать разумно. Очень надеюсь на это. Посмотрим.
Хочется напоследок каких-то позитивных новостей.
Boris, will there be a gun after all? Perhaps Trump will agree that Ukraine should buy weapons directly from the US. There is such a possibility. I think that Zelenskyy, having met with Trump, has already offered him funding, the very funds he was going to offer at the G7 summit in Canada. But the meeting did not take place then. Now Zelenskyy has had his chance, and he probably said, "Dear Trump, don't worry, the money is there, give me the weapons." It is no coincidence that Trump said he would supply Patriot systems. I think this is an important signal. So let's stay positive and optimistic. After this summit, a really important summit, the ice seems to have moved. We just have to wait for next week when Trump will finally talk to Putin, and then there will be concrete benchmarks. I want to believe that something positive will happen for Ukraine. We hope, we are waiting. By the way, there may be another meeting between the Russian and Ukrainian delegations next week. We will keep an eye on it.
Кстати, возможно, на следующей неделе также состоится очередная встреча российской и украинской делегаций, поэтому будем смотреть.
Friends, our meeting is coming to an end. Our poll on how the meeting between Zelenskyy and Trump went showed the following results. 38% think it was very good, 6% think it was bad, and 55% think that this meeting will not change anything. Write your opinion in the comments, put likes, and please do not forget to indicate from which country and city you are watching us. Thank you all for your attention. I wish you good news. Take care and see you soon. Thank you very much and glory to Ukraine.
Всем спасибо за внимание, желаю хороших новостей, берегите себя и до встречи.
Спасибо вам большое. И слава Украине!